This amazing picture of a flea was drawn by the scientist Robert Hooke through a microscope of his own design. It was drawn in 1665, a year where the flea did more to London than I think any creature had ever done before. In 1665, London became inundated with rats bearing fleas. These fleas carried the plague. The Great Plague of 1665 was unlike any other plague in Europe at that time. If seeing thousands of your neighbours dying of an invisible plague wasn't scary enough, doctors started to dress like this. But it really didn't matter how they were dressed. They were absolutely useless to everyone unless they had some of this. It turns out if you eat nutmeg, you will not get bitten by a flea. This was well known at the time and accounts for the fact that nutmeg, which is really very bland, was the most expensive commodity in the world at that time. It offered you immunity from plague. People weren't fighting over it for nothing, and they were fighting. In what was called the Second Anglo-Dutch War, Britain and Holland fought it out for control of the Spice Islands where the nutmeg was taken from. This was because nutmeg was the most expensive commodity in the world, and this was because of its known medical value. There's no other reason to fight a war over a spice. When I first learned about this, I couldn't believe I hadn't heard it before, and I don't blame you if you don't believe it. So here is some contemporary medical evidence showing the efficacy of nutmeg. The reference is at the bottom. It turns out the illustrator of this image, Robert Hooke, was a daily nutmeg imbiber. He kept records of these things in his diaries, including many weird and wonderful experiments he performed on himself, including all kinds of drugs and alcohol. He was a real self-medicator. It's also likely that Robert Hooke was the one who gave the Mayor of London the scientific advice to kill all the cats and dogs in London when the plague first arrived. This resulted in a proliferation of rats, which is not easy for me to say. Anywhere up to 250,000 people died in London as a result of the plague. I think it's worth reflecting on the power of the market, because a solution was available, treatment was available, but I guess if everyone had known about the properties of nutmeg, the price would have gone even higher. And isn't it interesting we're taught none of this at school?